So that note at the top of that run was an Altissimo G. I know it cracked a little bit at the start of it, but that's just proof for you. You can get it to speak because I'm awful at the notes in the Altissimo register, and it's taken me like a proper year to be able to get those notes to speak. And for me, I think G is one of the hardest ones because the Altissimo register is really an entirely different beast from the rest of the saxophone. Um, and when you're bridging that gap from the upper register of the normal instrument to the lower altissimo range, you're going from using a really high voicing. That is like the back of your tongue and your soft palate will be, raised up pretty high. And really your throat will kind of close off a little bit, hopefully not a ton, but it will a little bit to be able to produce those higher notes. But when you get to the lower end of the altissimo register, then that needs to almost be treated like you're playing a lower note. It's a similar voicing that you would use on a lower part of the instrument. So when you're going and trying to transition to the altissimo register, you probably don't want to start out trying to make that G speak because it can be really difficult for you. Instead, I recommend starting with the D that's an octave above palm key D, and you can get that to speak fairly easily, and then give you some success for you to be able to then work down from there by using a fingering just octave key and then front F key. And it'll produce that note that's an octave above that palm key D. And from there you can transition from that fingering to using palm key F fingering and being able to hit the D from there. And from there you can work your way down, and I recommend going and finding a fingering chart online and trying all the fingerings you can to get those notes working down from there. But just really focus and be aware of what's happening with the muscles around your throat, the muscles in the back of your like near your soft palate. They're kind of like the back of your neck, sort of in that area, and what needs to change to produce any kind of sound there. And this all takes a ton of time. This is like a year of practice for me to produce like that kind of bad sounding Altissimo G for me. So definitely don't expect it to happen right away, but it is reasonable for you to be able to get it to make a sound like in a few weeks. That's totally possible. It does take a lot of time put into practicing altissimo specifically. One of the things that I think about for that G specifically that gets it to speak pretty well for me is having this kind of area, like the middle of my neck, kind of being really, really wide and open, while having the back of my tongue against my soft palate be kind of raised up. So it's like the air is coming in, really, really supported from the bottom, from the base, and then it's getting kind of pinched off there and then shooting out really fast into the instrument. Another thing to think about is maybe where the direction you're directing your air into the mouthpiece. So I think for higher notes, maybe for that like altissimo D that's a bit higher, I maybe think about directing my air maybe like in this direction, kind of upwards. And then as I get lower in the altissimo register, it's kind of directing downwards. Where to the G, it's probably mostly directed below, like parallel. So that's another thing to consider. It's a lot of experimentation, figuring out what ideas for you will produce that sound, because you're working with muscles that your brain is not normally used to having to manipulate that way. So it just takes time to build the connections to those muscles in your neck and your throat and the back of your mouth to be able to produce those sounds. It's not easy, but it is possible. So the other thing is for G, when you get there, Definitely use this fingering of 1 in the left hand, 1 in the right hand, side B flat key with the index, and high F sharp key. Not the low F sharp key, but the high one. If you don't have a high F sharp key, then it'll be a little bit more difficult, but go 1, 3 on the left hand, 1 on the right hand, and side B flat. But if you have the F sharp key, definitely use this fingering first, and this is probably the first thing you should try when getting that note to speak. See if it'll work at all for you. So, hope that helps. Practice hard. It's a lot of work to get altissimo notes to speak.